Oh, recording in progress. So, when do we start?
Hi, everybody. You're good to go, Dave.
Oh, good to go. Hi. Hi, everyone. I've been relegated during this particular webinar, and Cassie's going to be the residing chair because it's a universal decision that I make too many comments that people don't like. So therefore, I'm getting things deleted everywhere. So I've got to shut the hell up and sit up the back of the bus and not make a fuss, but I will make a little fuss. It's going to happen. So look, just wanted to say thanks very much for tuning in today as we've titled this Beyond the Headlines, Creating Stronger Childcare Systems. Now, this is part one of what we're hoping will be a lengthy series of conversations that we'll be hosting where we can get people from different locations within the sector, operating in different areas, community, private, um, um, uh, before, after school, vacation care, all the different programs to be making a contribution about what we're discussing and where we see difficulties in the sector and how we're going to move forward with them. Part of what kicked this off, of course, was when Four Corners went to town in the documentary about the issues or highlighted serious issues that were happening in some services, which was quite horrifying when we looked at it. I'll talk a bit about that in a section, but the although the media plays an important role in shining light on these sorts of issues, media coverage alone doesn't fix it. All right, that just means that we're going to talk about it for a while, and in 3 days' time, everybody's forgotten about it because they've all moved on. So how do we take that information and make some sort of a change? Because this is we're not getting the support or the base level support that the sector needs from regulatory authorities and from government to boost up early childhood education to have us be able to provide the services that parents expect and that we want to provide. So how do we make the change? It's just not, this isn't just reactive change, but purposeful and sustainable and sector-led by the sector, what we do. And that's why we're here tonight. Start a genuine conversation about how we build a better system from the inside out. And this webinar is a discussion, not a lecture. We're not telling anybody what to think or do. It's just an opportunity for all of us to start, which there should have been more of this before, but anyway, starting now, is for all services to make some sort of contribution, to hear what's affecting other services, and to at the same time put forward their own views about things that are affecting them and how what they come up with as ideas to rectify things going forward. So and how we make that, how we start that change is having a genuine conversation about how we build that better system. So I guess the bottom line is to be a part of the movement and strengthen and protect the future of early childhood education, which is what we're ultimately all here to do. So thank you for tuning in. And I'll start by like to introduce the other people who are on the panel today. Christy from Gilgander Preschool, and Liz from Perfect Beginnings, Karina from Spunky Monkey, and Cassie and Maddie, who are from DJMIR, from our team, who are currently on notice after their comment today to me that they wanted to put one of those buzzy things on my neck that they reserve for dogs to stop them going through fences, so that when I rab it on, they can push a button and shut me up. Right. I remember. So anyway, I'll start off by saying a couple of things that I think are critical issues and ballpark issues that we have to look at going forward. First one, of course, is one of the things that I think other panel members are going to talk about too, is the difficulties we're having with training. in a nutshell, and I'll give you like two really good, simple examples I had over the last 2 weeks, right? I've got an accountant in Western Australia who has done a graduate diploma in early childhood education. So now he thinks he's a teacher, right? How's that work? Western Australia, for example, there's got another service over there at the moment that has Certificate 3 trainees that the Registered Training Organisation has been keeping them going for 4 years, right? 4 years doing a Cert 3, 115 hours of on-the-job training, and it's taking them 4 years and they still haven't finished. This is, and that's a tip of an iceberg. Then we've got RTOs falling over left, right, and centre. State training pulling people's qualifications in the various states and territories, pulling people's qualifications off them because they haven't been completed. The whole thing's a disaster. Now we've got this push by the current government. They're still current until we finally count the votes next weekend. They're now pushing people back towards TAFE. Now, for those of us who were around at the time, of whom one of them was me, in '96 we created the 3.4 position within the award, which was a diploma assistant, and it's for people who come straight out of TAFE who hadn't had any physical experience on the ground, to get them to come and could carry out all the duties of a diploma but not be in charge of the room. There was someone over them, right? That's why we created that. Then we went off and everybody turned into RTOs, and then we started doing that sort of training in the workplace, right? Now, the reason why we went away from that, moved into RTOs, is because the TAFE system didn't work, right? We're getting too many people coming into the sector who you wouldn't get them to organise a chook raffle because they just didn't have, you know, it's one thing to be trained as a diploma educator. It's another thing to be put in a room and trying to run a 20 or 30 toddlers, for example. So there's those sorts of problems. We've also, I think, the other big issue that we've got that I'm trying to do something about this year is that our parents don't know what we do, right? A lot of parents, probably 20% of parents, take an interest, 80% of parents don't. We need to get into the heads of the 80% and say, this is what we do, this is what quality looks like, and this is the cost of providing that quality care, right? And we need to get that information out so we can start having 1.8 million parents advocating for us instead of 60 odd parliamentarians dumping all over the sector all the time saying, oh, well, we're all profiteering, right? That's a bugbear of mine. And talk to them about early childhood brain development and provide them with that information that they just need to understand what we do and why important it is and how important it is. And I think that's those are critical issues. I'm going to stop talking now because I'm under strict instructions, and I'll be a very good boy because I've got to stack 2 people tomorrow.
Thank you, David. We will now move on, and I'd like to welcome Christy from Gilgandra to speak on her thoughts about strengthening Australia's early childhood education and care systems. Christy, the floor is yours.
Hi, how are we all? Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity from you guys to be part of the panel, to be able to talk about important topics within our sector. One statement that I really love is, if we're not part of the solution, then we're part of the system. So if we're not coming together and banding together and saying our voices and making it public, and we're just part of the system, we're allowing it to happen. So now's the time, I think, that we all need to stand up and voice our opinions. I just thought I'd let you know a little bit about me. So I've been in the sector for just over 20 years now, in many roles, many service types. Currently the director of Gilgandra Preschool, which is a small community and not-for-profit service. I do hold my certificate through Certificate 5 in training and assessing, and I'm also a casual HALT assessor for NESA when they engage me to do HALT assessment. The main focus that we did talk about for tonight is on training. So I thought that would be my main focus with some of my bugbears too and my thoughts. So I believe that there is a real disconnect between training and the realities of the work that we have. And there does need to be an urgent build to strengthen this and ensure that we've got quality assured systems in early childhood education and training. At present, many of the qualifications I feel don't reflect the lived complexities that we have in our sector, and those complexities over the last couple of years have astronomically blown out to what we were experiencing a few years ago. Our educators are entering the workforce ill-equipped to manage those requirements that we now have that are critical to ensure that we are providing children with the best service that we can. And burnout of educators and all staff within the sector is at an all-time high with these growing complexities occurring. So things like topics around appropriate behaviour guidance and the strategies that children can use, that educators can use with children, aren't being covered in qualifications. Identifying and supporting children with high support needs, which is on an all-time increase. It's very limited, the support that we get once we have a child in the system, and there's funding issues around this as well, which is a topic for another time. Navigating the complexities, as David said, with the family dynamics and communication challenges with families is a massive gap. And above all, I feel that there's a huge gap in our qualifications in getting people equipped to understand the layered and complexity of the child safety obligations that we have within our roles and within the service as a whole. I feel that if we want to uplift practice, we need training that doesn't just teach content, but it builds insight, empathy, and deep professional judgment. Then there's the track of the lack of training for directors and service managers out there, which there is pretty much zilch. My big concern, and it always has been a concern, that you can go sit a qualification, go and have a handful of placements, do most of your training in a classroom, and then you can walk straight into a service and become a director with little to no experience. This, I feel, is really concerning because we are one of the highest regulated service providers out there, and to have someone coming into this critical role with no skills and no experience to be able to lead and guide teams is a huge gap. I think that needs to be addressed as well. Additionally, the need for trainers and assessors within the actual RTOs is paramount, that they need to be quality to ensure that meaningful, high quality training is delivered. An example for me is I personally experienced an RTO approach someone that's just got their traineeship and have actually tried to push them into obtaining their TAE qualification and become a training and an assessor after 2 years of study. So in what world is this, assuring that the training that's provided to those coming into the sector is adequate if we're having people coming on to assess and train that have got 2 years of traineeship experience plus some TAE experience? When the bar is set this low, I feel it's impossible to build capable educators, and we need to uplift the professional standards for those entrusted with shaping our future workforce, with trainers needing to have adequate real-world early childhood experiences, a commitment to reflective practices, and a deeper understanding of the learning outcomes they're delivering to our sector. A big gripe of mine is the fast-track training programs also that are being offered. So these programs, I feel, are focused on the quantity and pushing people through as quickly as possible. I understand that we do have that urgent need for qualified educators, but at what cost is this? We've long struggled to receive individuals in full-length qualifications who have been insufficiently skilled. So how is condensing these pathways going to produce quality? This situation is different for those that have extensive experience in the sector at looking at increasing their qualifications, of course. However, offering pathways like this to new entrants or insufficiently experienced individuals into the early childhood sector is just a potential to cause further harm to the quality of outcomes that we have for our children. What we need is quality. I feel hands-on training delivered through a job experience and placements that are extended in high-performing services. Training and assessment must go beyond ticking a box, where students are given the opportunity to apply the theory that they've learned in real-world settings and then to build those meaningful reflective practices from the very beginning. When shortcuts are taken, I know that we've experienced that we've pretty much had to retrain staff from scratch and try and get them to unlearn what they know and then teach them again. This is an ongoing challenge of low professional standards within our sector, and it's not sustainable. It's not fair on the other professionals that they're working alongside. It's not fair on management, and more importantly, it's not fair to our children. I've also witnessed a worrying rise of practices that undermine the integrity of training from certain services. Students being allowed to copy and paste answers straight into their assignments rather than actually writing out their assignment to show comprehension and understanding. A growing culture of that tick and flick mentality, of competency in line with assessments. This is both from RTOs and service supervisors because we are time poor. So not showing those practical skills and understanding are signed off without true observations or consistency. Students being signed off also in despite of lack of clear competency. So sometimes this has even happened when hosting services have expressed their concerns. Signing off is still being occurred by RTOs, which is just crazy. As I said, I acknowledge that we are time poor and desperate for qualified staff, but this process is way too important to be treated as a ticking box exercise. And these are base level skills that we're expecting to form the foundation of our sector's future and for the safety and well-being of the children we serve. This isn't just a training issue, I feel, it is a child safety issue. When we prioritise completing the quotas over building genuine competency, we are jeopardising the very thing we're all here to protect, which is the children. And finally, I feel there is a pressing need for a transparent and accessible system that allows services and employers to ensure that RTOs meet their national standards, ensure that the qualifications are met and kept up to date with staff, confirming that assessment practices are robust and consistent. And I think the recent cancellation of the multiple RTO approvals recently have highlighted just how serious the issue is. It should not be this difficult to feel confident in the training that our future educators are receiving and that candidates with qualifications have received the correct training. So in conclusion, for myself, I think safe, enriching environments for children is what we all want, delivered by skilled and passionate educators. But for this to be achieved, my thoughts are we need to rethink how training is delivered and what is in training, strengthening how we assess and the qualification of those that are assessing, and to raise the bars for those who are educating our educators to be in the field. Because what's at stake here is not just the workforce quality, it's the future of every child in our care, I believe. Thank you. That's me.
Thank you very much, Christy. I think you had some really great points there, and I'm sure we can all agree, not just us on the panel, but everyone here today. If we aren't part of the solution, then we're just part of the system. And hopefully by running these sessions and opening it up to the sector to have a voice, we can make that change. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add on to that? Otherwise, I can pass it over to Liz to have a talk.
Cool.
Yeah, go for it, Liz.
Hey guys, so I'm Liz. I'm the operations manager for Perfect Beginnings up here in Queensland. We are a small, privately owned and operated organisation with 6 centres. Thank you, DJ Ma, for hosting such an important conversation. I think every person across the sector, far and wide, that I've spoken to since Four Corners released their episode have been busting to have some opportunity to respond to this, because I think we all felt very much painted by the same brush, even though there are so many services out there that are providing great quality of care and really trying really hard. That's not without saying that I definitely think that our sector is buckling, and we're just hanging on literally by a thread before something gives. And obviously it is at some services from what we all witnessed. I'm not sure of how much can change so quickly before another generation of our children are going to be affected by this. Because watching what we watched was really heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to see that these children have started their education and care journey at such a crucial time in their life, and that's what they experienced. It was really sad. In terms of talking, I won't talk too much about training. I will touch on it, but Christy just basically covered everything I was thinking. I think for a reform in our systems, it really needs to start at the very beginning. I've been a part of several new service approvals, and to become an approved provider or a nominated supervisor or centre manager, you don't actually need a qualification. You don't have needed to have worked a day on the floor in a centre or have any understanding. You sit an exam and answer some questions on the regulation. So these people are coming in by droves, our investors, into our sector. And I'm not saying approved providers and nominated supervisors out there that don't have a qualification are rubbish by any stretch. There will probably be some out there that are amazing. But the investors are flooding in, opening these services without a deep understanding of what it actually takes to educate and care young children in large environments. And I think when we look at a lot of our services and the comparison between, and I sort of pulled us all together in the private sector, where I believe you've got your big corporates in our private sector, but you also have your small privately owned services, and some of them are phenomenal. And I like to believe that we are one of them, that are droving in these, and they just see our sector as a money pit, a great way to make money. And many people I know that work at these type of services battle their owners or their approved providers or their management teams for the basic resources that they need, for basic training that they need, because unfortunately a lot of it comes down to the bottom line. So I don't know if starting at the very beginning of a service approval, a license needs to be focused on what knowledge and expertise do you actually bring to the leading and guiding of this business that you're opening. Because to build a house, you need to have completed a building license. Like, you have to know what you're doing. But yet in one of the most highly regulated professions and sectors, you can just walk on in and answer a few questions, and away you go with the lives of all these young children in your hands. So I think, should you have to have a diploma to be an approved provider or a nominated supervisor, or experience in our sector, experience in teaching, something, should that model be introduced to start from the very beginning? I don't know. I think another large contributing factor is definitely our RTOs. The quality of people that are coming through that are recent graduates or currently studying towards, even if they have a qualification, they're horrifically underskilled. They are not walking out with a diploma or a Certificate 3 ready to join our workforce, and they have meant to have been done their placements. But some centres have signed them off, some RTOs have signed them off. So like Christy mentioned, should services actually be approved to host students, have demonstrated that their centre is operating and their staff have that knowledge and understanding to host students and be mentoring our new workforce. If you are operating like some of these services we've all been made aware of, how on earth could you be signing off students and entering them out into the workforce? And I think that's where a lot of the buckling is coming from, because some of our highly skilled and highly qualified people are leaving the profession because they're so burnt out from working alongside people that cannot support them. And like Christy said, you know, the needs of children and families is just getting higher and higher and higher. and the level of skill coming into our classrooms to support our people is getting lower and lower and lower, and it's not balancing out, which is where I think we're hitting that breaking point. I too have had people come for interviews with the graduate diplomas, and some of them have degrees from overseas in accounting or business, or they have never worked in an early childhood service before and they want to be paid $51 an hour. And services are hiring these people in an early childhood teacher role because they have no choice. They need someone to run their program, and upper management expect the kindy funding to come, and to do that, you need to have a teacher there to do that. So these people are being put in to run a kindergarten room that they are not skilled and equipped for. And I believe that's where you start seeing these serious incidents, this lacking practice, lack of understanding that results ultimately in the detriment of the children that we're all looking after. And my final point would be our quality assurance systems that are currently in place, how our regulatory authority is actually monitoring services. Our organisation's approach is very much, we want them to come into our services, we want them to audit us, to observe us, to give us feedback. We want to be doing the very best that we can. And if there's an area we can improve in, we want them to let us know before we have a mishap, before we have an incident. But in all the services that I've been a part of, in any announced or unannounced monetary visit, they all look exactly the same. The authorised officer comes, someone from management or leadership does a lap around the service with them. They might point out a few things that need improving or ask for some paperwork, and then they go. I've never seen, might happen somewhere else, I've never seen them have conversations with educators. And I believe that would open a massive window of opportunity for educators to whistleblow if they feel management or practices at their service aren't being upheld, policies aren't being followed. That would give them an opportunity to have conversation. Even for the assessor to spend time, the officer to spend time observing practice. It's very easy to walk around a service for 15 minutes and everyone put on their best shoes and it all look hunky-dory, and then when the assessor leaves, it just goes down. And I know they say that's what rating and assessment is for, but when they're 3 years behind on the schedule, and then when they do come, the assessor has never worked in early childhood themselves, they have no qualification in early childhood either, and they're there to assess our practice for a few hours on the floor, and then a few hours on Teams, and then you get your rating assessment, and then they'll come back in several years. That system is clearly not resulting in consistent high quality care. I know most providers, even ones we connect with that do provide really high quality care, have lost complete faith in the rating and assessment process and don't even really focus on it. We just focus on doing what we do and constantly improving and doing the best we can, because it's just not providing quality. It's not resulting in quality, which is what the whole thing is meant to be for. So for me, they're the three things that I think could start some sort of systematic change if we're looking at who is actually investing in our sector. How are they getting their feet in the door? Is it actually going to be in the best interest of the community if this person opens an early learning centre in our community? But that's not even factored into it.
Thank you, Liz. You made some really great points, and some of the things you've mentioned have actually been expressed by a number of people watching tonight, especially in relation to the part that employers play in monitoring and guiding the training and signing off of educators within the service. So I think that's something we will circle back around to in a little minute. But we might just pass it over to Karina now to give her an opportunity to share her thoughts, and then I might come back to you if that's all right, because I think you had some really great points on that. Karina, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Karina. I have been in the industry for about 17 years. I have 4 childcare centres and they're called Spunky Monkeys Early Learning Centres. I also would like to thank David and the DJIR team for inviting me tonight, so thank you very much for having us. I totally agree with what Christy and Liz have both said. There's not much more I could probably say on training, but I do want to talk about an experience that we've had in the last 2 months. When we've interviewed new people to come on board, we interviewed a diploma qualified educator about a month ago. We asked them lots and lots of questions, but we asked them what quality area 2 involves, and they looked at us blankly. And when we prompted them that it was, you know, children's health and safety, they still didn't get a grasp of what quality area 2 is, and they're a diploma qualified educator. We then asked them about critical reflection. And even when prompted again, they talked about making checklists and signing off, you know, closing checklists and all these. That's not what critical reflection is. So if a diploma trained educator can't get those basic things that a Cert 3 should know, then how are they leading a room and things like that? The other issue that we've come across in a particular area that we have a childcare centre in is we have a lot of visas, a lot of overseas international people coming over on visas, working visas. We interviewed 2 Certificate 3 qualifications. One was brilliant. She knew her stuff. She could demonstrate the 7 quality areas. She could demonstrate the EYLF, and she hadn't been in the country very long, but she had learnt those terms. At least she knew that. The other person we interviewed didn't even really know about checklists or lockup procedures or nappy change procedures or anything. It was mind-blowing. And now I question, when I do interview new team members, is that piece of paper that they're handing to me actually real? Have they got this from the back of a Kellogg's box, or have they actually done the 12 months of training? Did they do their placements? Did they do them in a really good centre that actually trained them, or were they just there as a number? As an employer, I am concerned every time I interview someone, are their reference checks? Are they their friends? Is their resume AI'd? And how do we, I actually don't know how we overcome that until they're in our service, and we have 6 months to manage them and manage them out if they're not right. But then you have families that get concerned when you have people come into your service and then leave your service and then come into your service and leave your service. So it's trying to manage that in a service level is really, really difficult. I too watched that Four Corners report, and I too was absolutely devastated by it. But I guess what that's given me is the energy to make change. That has really given me the fuel to think I want to make a difference. Spunky Monkeys is going to make a difference. And I think 99% of us in our industry want to make a difference. I think there's a very small percentage of people that don't. And I hope that over the next few years, we do have policies, procedures and change to manage those people out of our sector. Yeah.
Thank you, Karina. I'd like to just circle back to what Liz mentioned, and Christine, maybe you might be a good one to speak on this, given that you've had some experience with NESA and things like that. A lot of people in the comments are expressing concerns that, yes, it falls with the RTO, but there has to be a level of accountability with the employers that are signing off on these trainees, these educators that are coming in and doing their pracs. What responsibilities do you feel that the employers have or should be taking alongside the RTOs to address this training issue that we're facing?
Yeah, well, it's definitely not that tick and flick that I mentioned. I know with paperwork that I get, that's about this thick, and you're like, I just want to get through this. But it's really important that we read it, and that if we're not sure if the staff member knows this or has demonstrated it, we need to question those staff and make sure that they're actually understanding it before we sign off on anything. My thing is, I don't want my name against anything to say, yes, this person can do it, and then they leave my service and all of a sudden they can't do it. And they've asked, oh, where did you get your training from? And they say Gilgandra Preschool. We don't want that. And I think that it's not fair on our sector for employers to just be ticking people off and signing them off because one, either they're time poor and they don't have the opportunity to, they need someone that's trained and they want someone that's trained within the service. But I think that we are just as culpable as making sure that these people are ready. If we're willing to take them on into our services, we need to take that responsibility to say, yes, we're willing to give you the best outcomes possible for our children and ensure that we are ticking them off to say, yes, we know definitely that they know their stuff here and that they can do it.
I agree. Dave, do you have anything you'd like to add on that from your perspective about the role the employers play in supporting the RTOs and monitoring who is being signed off?
Was that me?
Yeah,
You're
you.
giving me the opportunity to talk here.
I'll allow you to speak. You've been waiting patiently.
Guys, I'm never going to live this down. I've never been so gagged in my life. No, look, I think there's a whole lot of little things that have come out of this that are really, well, it's like a counsellor said to me once, how do you eat an elephant? It's one mouthful at a time. And this is a big elephant. But I think some of the things that I picked up on that were being said then that I think is very important is not just training people, but then also maintaining proficiency, because we have a proficiency system now with teachers, which is the best thing since sliced bread, I think, because now in early childhood education, people don't get an incremental increase for just turning up and getting older. Now they actually have to maintain their proficiency. I think there needs to be, I don't know the solutions to all this. It's just, I think there needs to be some discussion at some point in time about how we can, if we can, do something like that for early childhood educators so that they have an obligation to maintain their own qualification and skills. It doesn't just all fall back on the employer. We have a right as an employer to expect competency at level. If a person says they've got a diploma and they present themselves as having a diploma, then we have a right to expect that they're competent at that level. That's it's like when you hire a truck driver, they've got to be able to drive the truck. I mean, it's pretty fundamental. So there's that sort of thing. I think needs to have some more discussion about it. And the other thing that and I guess it's a bit of a side thing. The only thing I apart from the horror that came out of the Four Corners program was also that this bugbear I have that everybody keeps talking about the providers, and yes, the provider's ultimately responsible. The regulator tells us that all the time. Under vicarious liability, the employer is responsible for the sins of the employee. Sure, but then there's a level of responsibility that a person has to take when they're in this role. And as I commonly say, we're not running fish and chip shops. These are not even our own children. These are other people's children that have been entrusted to our care, and these are the things that have been evolving. So I think that's a real issue. Yeah, I'll stop now. Ignore the other 6 things.
No. So one of the questions that someone put through on our survey when we opened it up to the sector of things I'd like to talk about tonight was, do current childcare qualifications adequately prepare educators for the realities of working in the sector, especially when it comes to child safety and well-being? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? And do we feel that they adequately prepare educators for the reality?
No, I don't think they do at all. And what David mentioned when he was opening is like a diploma doesn't even touch on the neurological development of a child in the first 1,000 days, which is one of the most crucial tools that you could have when you're heading into a classroom, especially now with, neurodivergent children seem to be quadrupling, and caring for infants. It doesn't even touch on that at all. That's now training that we roll out to all of our staff because it's so essential to understand the why behind children's responses and reactions. But that's not provided. And when you get these people that walk through your door with a diploma, and some of them have even worked at other centres, which is interesting, stand in the room and they don't know what to do. They do not know what to do. And they've been a lead educator for a year down the road, apparently leading a room, but they're just crowd controlling. They actually don't understand what a quality curriculum looks like and how to deliver that at all.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that one. Do you think that the hours allocated in a Cert 3 or a diploma traineeship are enough to give the educators the skills that they need?
Not at all. I think it's enough to give them a little bit of a window to decide, is this actually what I want to do? But it's not enough. It's such a complex job that involves, as we've said, it's heavily regulated. And these people can come into, and like I mentioned before when we were having a chat, I've heard RTOs advertising that this is an entry-level position and no prerequisites are required, and anyone can come and work in childcare. So if you don't know what you want to do, just come and do this. But it's actually very complex to understand when you're in a room. You need to be switched on your supervision all of the time. Every word that you say is meant to be really meaningful and purposeful to a child. You're also focusing on the rhythm of the day and your routines on top of teaching an educational program to a child. You're not at Woolies scanning groceries. It's actually a lot to think about all at once.
Yeah.
And then some people add in their language barriers to it and a lack of training. It's very difficult. And I don't think the material that is taught supports it at all.
Yeah.
I think that,
Oh,
can I
sorry.
throw in something? On top of that too, it's all very well for you know, regulatory organisations and governments to keep moving the barrier, but they don't do anything about the training. So they keep saying they expect more and more, but we're not, as providers, given the tools to achieve that. If anything, there's a widening gap. So you know, absolutely, I agree with what you're saying. That's just, it's very, very difficult, and it's not, you know, it is a complex job, and you've got to have your head on a swivel. You can't stand in the corner and talk about what you're going to do on Friday. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah. And I agree with that too, David. One of the things, I think it was Karina who mentioned it, about having people come in for interviews and didn't know what quality area 2 was. Karina, obviously mandatory reporting and checks for, you know, working with the children and things like that are very different in all states and territories. Do you think that when educators are undergoing training, they should be learning about what's expected nationally, not just in their state that they're based or that they're studying in? Because we see a lot of people moving between states and different requirements in different states. What's your thoughts on that?
I think we need to have a national level. I think it needs to be, we all travel around Australia. People move interstate all the time where we are. We need to have one body. And I would like to take it one step further. I think that everyone that gets a diploma, a Cert 3, should have a number so that we know that they have that qualification. And I also think that if you're getting a Cert 3, trainee, 18 months is the way to do it. When we interview, we try to interview someone that's done an 18-month traineeship. We don't really like to have someone that's done 4 weeks here and 4 weeks there and they've got their certificate. That's not easily done in all areas, but that's what I think. I just think trainees, I don't know why you get a certificate 3 any other way than other doing a trainee. You have to learn on the job. You can't learn through a textbook.
Yep.
And I think the courses, while they're nationally based, it varies on the content, sometimes subject to what state they're in. And I think that opens up an issue when educators, and I've had people come from different states where there's different child protection requirements and different organizations that things get reported to. And it's almost like you're starting all over again in retraining them because they're not aware of what's going in your state.
And I guess the other thing is too, like we went at a stage, had 3 different RTOs doing our trainees, and every RTO approached to every subject differently. And some were way too intense that a Cert 3 was getting like crying, upset because they couldn't figure it out. And then some were so basic, like there needs to be consistency so that every RTO is delivering the same package, the same way, with the same standards.
Yes.
So that, I guess, would lead into this one, and maybe Christy, again, you've had some experience in assessing. Do you think we should have a national body specifically focusing on quality assurance for early childhood training providers?
I think, yes, it's definitely a good idea. We need to ensure that, you know, someone that's got a certificate 3 just because they've got a certificate 3 doesn't mean that they've got the on the ground experience either. So we have had people that we've hired, and yes, 10 years ago they got their certificate 3, but they've never stepped foot in an early childhood service. So having something that employers and when we're doing interviews and that we can see, okay, yes, they've had X amount of time without being on the floor, but they've got the qualifications, so therefore we're going to have to do a fair bit of work. Or do we need to look at someone else, or do we need to look at upskilling them with the latest certificate 3? But definitely I think we need quality insurance, just so then we as employers and also educators, we can ensure that we are supplying people that are experienced in the service.
Yeah. Dave, you might be able to shed some light on this one. We see it a lot in our role. Critical issues like child protection, incident, illness, trauma, things like that within the sectors, and communicating to these things to families. We often see that educators don't have the experience or the skills to be able to communicate those things to families or report them to the people who could communicate. Do you think that the training that's being offered at the moment is delving deep enough into that, Dave?
I don't think it is at all. I used to say that I didn't like to think we were getting crazier than we used to be, but I think that we are seeing a significant increase. And I mean, but part of this increase in neurodiversity, I think, is it's like Cassie, Kirsty can talk about, was too many K's in my life. Kirsty can talk about is the fact that the significant impact of COVID on all of the children coming through now, who are all getting to the age where they're going off to high school and they're just not ready. There's all these developmental triggers that just haven't happened because of the isolation. And it seems even almost worse in Victoria than anywhere else, because they had significant periods of complete isolation. And this is the reality. And we've got parents coming through who are I make coarse jokes about it sometimes, about how the parents are crazier than the children, but I think I'm not that far off the mark sometimes. The parents who are coming through, they don't know how to parent. They haven't been shown, they haven't grown up around that sort of an appropriate modelling for themselves. They're impacted too, and these children, we've got a medical profession who's too quick to hand out pills, and that doesn't fix the problem, that just masks it. And so I think that's a real problem and I deal with those sorts of things now almost on a weekly basis with various services who and everybody screams discrimination as soon as you say, well, hang on, but we can't, we've spent 18 months trying to work with your child. We don't have the skill set. We can't. You need to get some professional assistance. We've got no problem at all about running a mental health plan or behavioural or behavioural plans. We can do all that. No problem. We got those skills hands down. But we are not behavioural psychologists. We are not child psychologists. We don't have that level of skill. You have to get that. You can access it. There's various funding available through various sources, and so they can get that assistance. But the parents don't want to do that. They want to blame the service and say there's nothing wrong with my child. You broke them. So there's all that sort of stuff we have to deal with as well. And our staff, through the training that they go through, they don't receive any training on this stuff. Anybody who knows anything has either they've either bought it with them through their own experiences in their own family half the time, or it is something they've had an interest in and they've picked up somewhere along the way. I think that's a real problem where we are not geared up to deal with the problems that the children have when they come to the services.
Yeah. And I think someone just mentioned in the comments that an important part of you know, the early childhood sector is providing that support to families,
Mm.
and
Right.
being able to provide them the resources and the tools, which I think brings us back to educators and sometimes directors too and approved advisors don't have the skill set to have those hard conversations and know where to go. So I think there needs to be more training on how we're communicating and how we're providing these supports to families within the sector.
Can I just throw one quick thing in just on what Karina mentioned before? See, in 2011, when we went to the new legislation, we had national law that applied, right? And it was all promoted as this is the terrific thing, even though it's Victorian legislation that the federal government picked up, which means they can't change it. We had a national system. They promoted it as a national system, and we all thought that's terrific. And then every single state went off and set up their own regulations that are all different. And why the hell don't we have a national system for police checking and for working with children checks? Why don't we have a national system on that? That Victoria's got a really good one, but it's, you know, but there's all this, there's just so many holes in the whole system. And we as a sector have to try and navigate it all the time and keep putting band-aids over the gaps. It's very, very difficult. I'll shut up now.
That's okay. Liz, or in light of the recent things in the media, do you think that there should be more mandatory modules? And yes, I know we do child protection training. I know it's part of the Cert 3 and diploma, but do you think there should be more modules focused on ethics and accountability when it comes to child protection?
Definitely. And because the child protection that we do now that's mandatory up here in Queensland anyway, is more about knowing yourself as a mandatory reporter and how to report things. It doesn't necessarily guide the educator on how to conduct themselves with children, with families, and to have child safe practices themselves and how to promote that. So I definitely think it would. I guess playing the devil's advocate, you also need to have a workforce that are going to be able to digest and understand all that information. Because at the moment, I know there's a lot of people in our sector that would probably sit there and agree and take it in, and then when you see them out there, it just wouldn't be put into practice. But it definitely needs to be a core component of something that we have to touch on every 12 or 24 months. And that's the providers need to be held responsible for ensuring that training goes through, just like our first aid and CPR and all of that stuff.
Yeah. I just want to put this out there and hear anyone who wants to answer it before I hand it over to Maddie, because she has some comments and statements that people have submitted. How do we think the government services, RTOs, can collaborate more effectively to ensure we have a united quality-driven approach to training educators, but also maintaining that training? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think they've all got to stop looking after their own patch, right, and start being consistent. We don't have consistency in anything, and like, you know, it's even within a state. Even you just look at the regulatory authority and what they do in some places, what they do in others is completely inconsistent, and it's the same with the you know, state training organisations like in states that will remain nameless. Like I'm aware of one where they've if you're within a certain parameter from where the head office is, they'll jump all over you like a ton of bricks if something goes wrong with if you try and do anything to a trainee, or God forbid you try and discipline them or speak to them about the fact that they have to improve their attitude about things and their communication skills and being more attentive to what they're doing. This is on the ones that actually stay rather than throw their hands in the air and say, help you bullying me and leave. But there is no consistency in that approach. That same state-based organisation, you can take other people who are another 200 kilometres away, and nothing will ever happen. So there is nothing constant. They keep talking about quality like there's this wonderful label, but there is no consistency to maintain that quality or to support it. Yeah, that's all.
I think, you know, a big change could be example, we have NESA accreditation, we have other accreditations in other states for our ECTs. I myself would love to see that kind of accreditation or, professional development period for other educators. I myself have had my diploma for a very, very long time, but I haven't worked in service myself hands-on for 10 years. I've still worked in the sector, so I've maintained my knowledge, but reality is I could walk back into a service tomorrow and someone's going to say, great, you have 20 years experience. Doesn't mean I've maintained those skills. So I think there needs to be ongoing training, ongoing requirements. And yes, as employers and directors, we all try and upskill our staff and provide them with the training, but we also know how hard it is to get the staff to actually want to do those training. Get them to and give it their all, not just sit there and go through the motions. So me personally would like to see there be some kind of accreditation, professional development requirements for educators other than our ECTs within the sector. I think that would make a really big difference.
It's like the numbering system that Karina was talking about, which is a good idea, because you get those same problems. Like I dealt with a service today, who's got an employee who's being paid as a diploma. She's running a room. She's sort of a little bit sketchy around the side, but what they found going through the documentation in the service, because it's a new purchase for them, is there's no copy of her qualifications. So they said, can you give us the qualifications? Oh, it was with the old owner. Okay, well, fine. But you get them for us. We need them. This has gone on for 5 weeks. And like I said to them today, you got any idea how much drama you're going to be in if somebody walks in the door and does a spot check? And I hope you've got a paper trail to say you've been chasing this, but you've got to draw a line in the sand. Turns out this person's never paid for their training. So they're trained with an RTO, and the RTO never issued the certificate because they didn't pay for it.
See, and that highlights the issues we face that aren't just about RTOs. It falls back on the employer as well. And yes, there are some great employers out there that are all over it, but there are also employers out there that are allowing that person to continue to work, so they themselves are failing those children. And there's so many layers to this, so many, and these are things we'll delve into as the weeks go on.
I think it's the same with RTOs too, Cass, though. We've got some brilliant RTOs out there who are fantastic, and then we've got the others that aren't necessarily. And what we're talking about with changes to qualifications and things, that's not on RTOs, that's on training government legislation and those that are forming the packages. So it's really important that we can get in their ear as well to help the RTOs to be able to provide these sorts of things to educators.
Yeah. And it's just, we all need to get on the same page. I know, at the centre I manage, I've had a Mexican standoff with our registered training organisation because I'm very clear that, well, my trainees cannot start until they've been signed up, because in New South Wales, we don't have that 3-month buffer. She was gobsmacked and was like, what are you talking about? So we all need to get on the same page. And I think that's the big thing, is getting on the same page.
I was going to say, I think that you actually shouldn't be allowed to get a working with children check, work in a childcare setting, if you don't have the qualification, if you don't have the child protection refresher. All of those, if we could tie that system together, that they actually can't get the working with children check, then they can't work in the sector. That would be brilliant.
Yeah. There's some big changes that need to happen, and like Christy said, it's not just about taking these things to the RTOs, it's taking it higher than that and getting people to listen and getting them to make that change. We would now like to share some of the statements submitted via our survey link. Some people had some really great things that they'd like to express and put out there to the sector and have their thoughts heard. And that's the whole purpose of tonight, is to share the views and thoughts of the sector. So I'm going to invite Maddie to read these. Some of these are anonymous, some of them might have names to them, but it's a welcome, and then we welcome the comments in the panelist following each one. So Maddie, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Cass. So we'll try and get through as many of these as we can, but I'm conscious about the time also. So If at the end of reading any of these, the panel would like to open for discussion, please go for it. But I'll keep all of these anonymous, as that's how they were submitted through the survey, is anonymously. So the first statement that was put through is that all educators should have to complete CPD points like other professions. It should be their responsibility to continue working in childcare, and they should have a registration they renew every year. This keeps educators accountable for their knowledge and training and keeps them up to date. So many educators have qualifications and have been working for 10, 15, 20 years and are not practicing up to current standards. So I think that kind of ties in a little bit to what you guys have touched on not too long ago. Do you have anything else you want to expand on that, or is it?
Yeah, I personally think it would be a great thing to see. And I mean, someone in the comment has just written the same thing, that, you know, accountants have to do it. There are a number of industries that are required to maintain professional development and upskilling, and not just professional development at the discretion of the employer. It is mandatory professional development. Yeah.
The next one I have here is that fast tracking training to get educators in services is contributing to the staffing crisis. Experienced educators and managers are burnt out without having the additional responsibility of training new educators that are well below expected standards. Ongoing placements in all service types is crucial for training educators to develop good understanding of the role. If graduating students were allocated experienced mentors who had the responsibility of supporting them in their first year out, it would create more leadership roles and additional support for emerging educators. Cutting corners with content or course time is definitely not the answer. There'd been a lot in the comments tonight talking about how there is an element of responsibility on the employer to mentor, to lead, to put them through any additional training and things that they feel their staff need. And I think this nods back to that as well, is again, there has to be a level of responsibility taken in a number of ways.
Yeah.
As I said, if you put your hand up as an employer, you need to be committed to being able to provide quality to those educators. You can't just expect that they can walk in and know everything. You have to actually put that time and effort into them.
So this next one is talking about when interviewing for staff. And once I've read this, I'll reflect on a comment that's been made tonight in the chat. But this says that it's a really hard one, but how do we get real references? I've stopped calling them because they are mates and not employers. I get people don't get along, but let me read between the lines. I'm old school, so please don't hate me, but I think offering school-based traineeships really need to be looked at, as I've tried and tried again, but these kids aren't ready for the industry. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I see this as almost a 2-point in here. I think someone else had mentioned in the comments that, you know, references when people are applying for a job, it's a big thing. You want genuine references. You want to know the history of this person you're employing. The other part of this I'm seeing is school-based traineeships, and are they actually ready, or are they suitable for the industry? Is probably another big component.
And I think you're right there, Maddie. I think that with school-based traineeships, some of them aren't ready, but unfortunately, because our sector is looked at as there's no skill set needed, there's no previous training needed. It is often pushed within the schools. Oh, you're not happy at school, you don't want to be at school, you can go and do a traineeship in childcare. And I think that's an issue, because they do need to have some level of interest and passion and drive to work with children. You cannot work in this sector if you do not have a passion for it. You cannot. It's impossible. So I do think that some of these children coming in through school-based traineeships don't necessarily have a passion for the sector. It's easy. It gets them out of school, or it gets them, as you know, their school certificate or whatever it may be, but it shouldn't be their first choice. They need to have a passion for it.
Mhm.
And we've had some school bases that come through and have turned out to be our shining leads 5 years later and are phenomenal. And they showed up every week on their day and they were full of passion and just loved it. And we've had some that just haven't cut the mustard and we've had to cut them really quickly.
Yeah.
But
And I think it comes
it's
down to at least people have the passion.
yeah.
They want
And
to.
like I think that to secure our future workforce, I don't know if that's a door that you can just close, but I think a lot of things play into it, what community you're in and what schools you're linking to and what kind of children are being attracted and why they're being attracted, plays a big part in it. But I do think as part of our future workforce, they do play a role in that, but not all of them. But it's the same, I think, with when you're looking at any group that we employ, whether it's trainees, school-based, diplomas, leads, any of those, management, some of them cut it and some of them don't.
I mean, on the comment, Maddie, about, how do we do the reference checks and check those things? That is something at DJMI that I have been working on in my spare time, is developing a tool that allows approved providers, nominated supervisors, whoever it may be, to have a bit more of an understanding, links in each state of where you can check qualifications, where you have to check certain documents, because a lot of people, again, don't even know that you can do those things. So I'm trying to develop a tool that will support those people in that. So it is a work in progress. So
Might I just add in too about references? You can reject references just because somebody gives you something doesn't mean you have to accept that as gospel. You can say to them, well, great, but I need some more, or I'm sorry, I don't need the team leader in the baby's room when you're working in the preschool. I need the director of the service. Oh, well, I didn't leave there under, I left there under a cloud. Well, that's fine. Give me a reference from somewhere else then. Personal references, I mean, personal references don't mean anything because, who's going to write, I'll just go over and see you. Hi, can you write me a reference? You mongrel. Yeah, you are. That's what I think of you. Oh, great, thanks. Nobody's going to get a bad reference from those sorts of things. But as I say to people all the time, you're making a $70,000 decision based on a half-hour interview and a few bits of paper. So stretch it out. Go through qualification processes, get them to, have a panel of people to pick an employee, grab people out of your workforce that are people who you like the way they work, you like their attitude and their ethic as an early childhood educator, and put them on the panel. They don't even have to ask any questions. They will naturally they will be naturally drawn to people who have similar thinking. This is all profiling stuff, but it's true, I promise. Scout. Well, I wasn't actually, but I wanted to be. But the point is though that the more people you've got looking at the same issue, the less likely you are to miss something. And check references, absolutely. And if you don't trust them, and you'll know when you're talking to someone on a phone, and if you don't trust them, then don't be concerned about going back to someone and saying, look, I need some more references, because your references, I wasn't happy with the references you provided. I need some more people who talk about your work and your knowledge in early childhood education. We've got some referee questions on a list as part of our package information on the website, but that's what Cassie's going to be upgrading that as part of this whole process.
Awesome. I will move on to the next one. It says that department officers, so what they would like is for department officers to work with them as opposed to against them.
Yep.
And different compliance system. Right now, all the officers have to leave each service giving out at least one breach. This is extremely disheartening and has created a huge gap between their regulators and the sector. They want to bridge the gap by being a partner. They don't want to feel like they're being an opposition.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here and maybe have a bit of an unpopular opinion. Yes, that does happen. I hear services that get breaches for a cobweb on a light. But again, at the service I've managed, we've had, in the last 2 years, maybe 4 spot checks. And our compliance officer is generally amazing. And I haven't received not one non-compliance. So I think it comes down to the individual that is coming and doing it. Some compliance officers are generally there to work with you and help you and support you, but they are very few and far between. So I will jump to the department's fence there, which doesn't happen very often. There are some genuine ones that want to support you and help you. There are a large portion out there that.
And how hard can it possibly be for somebody to walk into a service and start the conversation by picking something positive and saying, gee, I really like what you've done there, and this is really clever, that's really interesting, and then start. I mean, you know, otherwise it's just like you're being visited by the military police all the time, and everybody's, you know, nobody wants to see to the department, and that's not what their job should be, you know.
And I think it does. It makes people fearful of them. I often say to our clients, why don't you ring your field officer? And they'll say, oh, no, I can't ring her. I ring ours all the time. I have it like on speed dial. When I ring her, she even has my number saved, you know, because that relationship is there. It's not feared. But unfortunately, a lot of services out there don't have that relationship, and that really does impact. Yeah.
And I think that's the key, is relationship. We've gone back to sometimes we can have a different officer every single time coming in to the service, rather than someone who truly knows who the service is, the people in the service, and what we're about. We need that consistency, just like children. We need the consistency as well of the person to actually really get to know us and be there genuinely wanting to build that relationship. And as you said, genuinely wanting to come in and help.
And I think if there was the consistency, if there was a non-compliance or a breach, next time they come back, they're going to see the growth. They're going to see the quality improvement. And is that not the whole purpose? Is quality improvement, striving to do better. But when you have someone different coming in every single time, half the time they don't even read what happened with the visit before. So services aren't getting that praise of, great, you rectified that, and I see that improvement. Yeah.
I will read this one, and it will probably be the last one that we will have time for tonight. But this one states that I totally understand our sector is in crisis and morale is low. I also feel this, which is why after 30 years in management, I am walking away. There is next to no support for service managers. I will add that whilst I understand how people are feeling, I am also totally embarrassed to read the ongoing commentary from educators online. The lack of ownership for knowing basic information, the constant complaining, and ongoing talk of bullying in the sector is doing more damage than it is good. In my opinion, this significantly contributes to our poor public profile and is a far stretch from showing that we are well educated and a professional sector.
And you know what? I don't even think that needs anyone to respond to it, because I think that
it wraps it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, well, I would like to thank everyone who has provided their input in the survey link, messages, emails. It's very heartwarming. It's welcomed. It proves that as a sector, we are all in this together and that we want to have these conversations. I'll now hand it back to Dave to close the webinar, but I also want to thank everyone who's joined us tonight and participated. So Liz, Christy, Karina, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and everyone who's online as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for everybody for participating. And the thing that I guess I wanted to finish off on was just to make the comment that I find it really encouraging in a funny way that everybody is having the same experience. You know, we are all, the people online, the comments coming back, everybody is having the same problems. So there's now going to be a bit of a ground flow in this, and we take this information that we've come out with today, and then we can start boiling it down into those key areas and then start going forward. But to me, it's a really good indication that the entire sector is all looking at the same thing in the same way. That now gives us 10,800 approved providers, and you know, who are all thinking about things the same way. And now, you know, yes, it can become a, you know, pardon the comment, but it is a voice for change, and it just now gives us a bit of a platform to be able to go forward to government and to the regulator and say, well, look, we expect more from you guys. You know, we expect more from you. It's a two-way street, right? You can't just keep telling us we're failing. You've got to support us so that you don't have these issues with us all the time. And I think that's just something we have to go on. But otherwise, I'm glad everybody, I hope everybody had a good time. This will be the first of many, and we'll get my boundaries sorted out so I know what I can say and I can't say, but that's that's my issue into the future. But anyway, for you guys who participate in the panel, thanks very much for this. It's been great, and we're going to get different people to come onto the panels at different times to give their experiences along the same line. There's one of our service providers in Victoria that I want to try and get onto the next panel, and they are actually an RTO as well as operating their own services, and they've been doing it for years, and they employ way too many staff to make sure that they produce educators who are trained to educate. So I think it'd be really good to get some information from them as well. Otherwise, keep passing the open windows.
So tonight's webinar, just quickly before everyone jumps off, will be uploaded on our YouTube channel as of tomorrow. So we now have one of them. So Maddie will share our YouTube channel on social media, and we'll email that out so everyone has the link. Tonight's discussions have really reminded us that while change is real, so is the passion and the commitment within our sector to do better and be better. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen in isolation. But by us all coming together and asking hard questions and pushing for meaningful reforms, we're taking that step to making a difference. So we encourage you to continue having these conversations with your teams, your networks, with us, you know, in the public, and to keep an eye out for upcoming sessions in our series as we continue to unpack the key issues shaping the early childhood sector and explore practical pathways moving forward. So thank you, everybody.
Okay.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
everybody. Good night, everyone.
Okay. Bye.